everyone, we are the group 2 and we will going to discuss the electronic language corpus and its textual dimensions.
Do that one dance, baby. That one dance.
So let us begin with the meaning of ELC. So ELC stands for electronic language corpus, and that is a large collection of text. It can be written or it can be spoken text that is stored in a computer. So it is also used for the analyzation of lexical and grammatical features. And basically, it is a tool or a method to study language and for the purpose of investigation of linguistic phenomena. In ELC or in electronic language corpus, there is a representation of the sample language used, because imagine there are a lot of people who are using technologies. It can be computer, tablets, phones, laptops, and more. And it is very hard to investigate if there are abundant words included in the corpus, and that is why there are just some chosen words that are intended for the investigation. So what is a textual dimensions? So a textual dimensions are functional categories which cuts across traditional genre classifications. So there are some researchers like Milena Collett and Nancy Bilmer who are using the electronic language corpus, and they apply the Biber's factor analysis to the corpus, because they aim to compare the electronic corpus with computerized corpora of spoken and written English. So these two researchers have a question in their mind, like how this new variety of language differ from the other varieties of language which have been analyzed. So Milena Collett and Nancy Bilmer also believe that an empirical study of electronic language requires a suitable model. That is why they use the MDMF or the Biber's multi-dimensional multi-feature model. They use that model for the study of situationally determined language variation. So there is a model that is being used as a framework in electronic language corpus, and that is the Biber's multidimensional multi-feature model, or MDMF model. So this model has 6 dimensions. The first dimension is all about the informational versus involved production. The second is the non-narrative versus narrative concerns. The third is all about explicit versus situated dependent reference. The fourth is overt expression of persuasion. The fifth one is abstract versus non-abstract information. And the last one, which is the online information elaboration.
So we are here to tackle about the profile of the electronic language corpus. So the corpus consists of 2 subsets, the offline and the other. So offline words and the other words. Offline messages are pre-written and can be positively identified by the presence of a tag. A tag were typically inserted after the last line of a message, which indicates that an electronic mail reader was used. Offline mail reader programs always add this signature as a form of advertisement So it would seem reasonable to assume that messages not explicitly identified as offline are online. Like ordinary conversations, they are composed on the fly. However, there is always the possibility that certain messages were pre-written using an ordinary word processor or editor in a multitasking environment, in which case a male reader tag would not appear. Since this means that the online category could not be positively identified, we designated it other rather than online. So, as we can see in the table, there is a classification of offline and the other, and in between of that are the conferences. So, in the offline, it consists of the messages, the authors, and the words. While in the other side, in the right side, we can see the messages, authors, at the same time words. So, to apply Bieber's analysis to the electronic language corpus, it was first necessary to tag the corpus, to assign a part of speech label to each word in the corpus. So before you get confused with the numbers appearing in the table, let me tell you first what corpus means. So a corpus is a collection or body of knowledge or evidence, especially a collection of recorded utterances used as basis for the descriptive analysis of a language. Basically, this table is just a presentation of the offline or the written words, and the other as associated with the spoken words. An extract from the comparative statistics for Bieber's corpus and the electronic language corpus. As we can see in the table, it displays the linguistic feature, the Bieber mean, the English language corpus mean, the Bieber standard deviation, the ELC standard deviation, and the FDS, which stands for feature deviation score. So feature deviation scores were computed for the entire corpus of messages, for the offline subset and the other subset, and for each conference. So to interpret this table, the findings of the study presents that there is no difference between speech and writing. So electronic language displays some of the linguistic features which have been associated with certain forms of written language, and others which are more usually associated with spoken language. Meaning to say, the data presented from Bieber's corpus and English language corpus does not differ from one another. This table reveals that the corpus statistically compared shows that the frequency of words, the collocation or the proper word usage, and the concordance or the grammar of each conference are fairly used.
In relation to electronic language, textual dimensions must be considered. In this framework, it is proposed by Bieber, which he identifies textual dimensions characterized by the presence and absence of linguistic features. Bieber's first dimensions was labeled as informational versus involved productions, like verbs, first and second pronouns, hedges like, sort of, kind of, and F clauses. On the other hand, a text may consider as informational scale if it has nouns attributed with adjectives, prepositions, and adverbs. Examples of informational versus involved productions are biographies, press reviews, fiction, professional letters, face-to-face conversations, and so as telephone conversation. So all these things are in in line or involved with informational versus involved production. Another dimensions, we have non-narrative versus narratives. So with respect to narrative pictures, Weber says all markers like past tense and perfective aspect which describes past events, and it uses third-person pronouns. So the genres must resemble professional letters, telephone conversations, and press reviews. So another examples are romantic fictions, so since it is more narrations, biographies for non-narratives, prepared speeches for narratives, personal letters, and broadcast. So that's for non-narrative and narrative dimensions of textual dimensions.
So Biber and others says that corpus linguistics makes it possible to identify the meaning of the word depending on their occurrences in natural context rather than relying on the intuition about how the word is used. I'm going to further discuss about the third and fourth dimensions, textual dimensions actually. The third textual dimension is the situation dependent versus explicit. These features, which carries a large positive weight on this dimension, are relative constructions. Examples of those are the relative clause and object position, the Pied Piping relative clause, and the relative clause and subject position. An example for the relative clause and object position is the phrase, the man whom Laika likes. It's also something or more information about the man who Laika likes. And next is the Pied Piping relative clause. The Pied Piping mechanism is more flexible in relative clauses in English than in interrogative clauses because it can pipe material that will be less acceptable in the corresponding interrogative clause. An example of this is the manner in which he was told, or she laughed because of the face you made. And lastly is the relative clause and subject position. An example phrase of this is the man who likes popcorn. It tells us more information about the man that he likes popcorn. And these are all devices that can be clearly stated and can clearly give us an information about the text that we are reading because it elaborated the identification of the words that are used in a context or in a text. And in contrast, the three features which with negative weights are the time and place adverbials such as later, yesterday, above, and certain other adverbs are considered markers of reference in times, places, and events which can only be correctly interpreted if the addressee has enough knowledge about what he is intended to say, such as see above. There are no clear instructions on what to see or what to look after above. An example also is just below us here. We have no idea on what are the things or who are the people below us. And to be able to confer on the basis of the context, we should always know that we have to actually give emphasis on what we are actually saying in order for the readers to know what we are intended to relay or explicitly say in a message or the text. So the fourth textual dimension that I am going to discuss is the overt expression of persuasion. This dimension is characterized by prediction and necessity modals, suasive verbs such as commands and demand, conditional subordination that are dependent clauses that are used to describe the condition about something that may or may not happen. And the most common subordinating clauses or conjunctions that introduce conditional clauses are if, in the event that, unless, even if, whether or not something to happen or happening. And which are seen as marking the speaker's attitude towards the proposition encoded in the infinitive clauses, such as the phrases happy to do it, hope to see you, hope you can come. And in the ELC, many of these features have higher frequency than in Viber's corpus. However, three features that are less frequent, such as tracer verbs, necessity modals, and split auxiliaries, because there are actually also factors that affects the factors influencing overt expression of authorial presence. Those are the writer status, cultural context, disciplinary inventions, topic and purpose of the text, which whether it's informative or persuasive, the situational writing context such as the task or the setting, and the audience as well, which whether it's a special audience, a specific audience, or the general audience. And the overt expression of persuasion, as what I've mentioned, the two features such as the modals and the quote conditional subordination. It defines an overt of expression of persuasion types such as the editorials and professional letters. As we all know, editorial letters, editorial cartoonist in editorial writing gives us emphasizes their opinion about something that they want us to know, they want us to be persuaded of, and they want us to believe too.
So today I'm going to talk about Dimension 5, Abstract versus Non-Abstract Information, and Dimension 6, Online Information Elaboration. Dimension 5, Abstract versus Non-Abstract Information. This is based on the presence or absence of features such as conjunctions like however and contrast and etc. Passive like by and adverbal subordinator like since, while, and etc. Neither of these presence appears to play a major functional role, so Viber included them only because they co-occur with features which do play a major role. Dimension 6, Online Information Elaboration. It is classified according to the presence or absence of features such as that clauses as verb complements, that relative clauses in objective possession, and that clauses as adjective complements. The text in ELC are largely produced under the real-time constraints, so participants tend to overcome this constraint by backtracking and making impromptu clarification and adding information in sequence which is not strictly thematic.